One of the big questions we've gotten this winter is there anything as a farmer that I should change this year when it comes to corn herbicides?
Well, there are a lot of those questions, and when you look at the dollars and cents of it, yeah, there is a lot of jockeying around you can do to get good programs for the same or less money. And whenever you see price increases like we've had, especially with glyphosate over the last year or two, you really have to question what corn program you're using. Because you say, well, I've just been using 2 shots of Roundup before, and all of a sudden Roundup is about $10 an acre. Well, boy, there's a lot of things you can do with a $20 program or a $25 program. You've got lots of choices that could give you even better weed control.
Okay, let's start with this. As a general rule, we would recommend putting a pre-emerge herbicide out. So if you're going to have Roundup corn or Liberty corn, you can use a reduced rate of a pre-emerge herbicide in many cases. Now, don't get me wrong, if you have heavy weed pressure, or let's say it's new ground that you're just picking up and you're not sure if you have heavy weed pressure, I would probably err on the cautious side and use the full rate of the pre-emerge herbicide. But we really like having pre's out for one main reason, just so we don't have early weed pressure robbing our yield. Because very often what we see is guys don't get that Roundup sprayed at the right time, and even if they think they sprayed at the right time, the weeds were allowed to grow for a little while in those fields. And very often, if you look at yield studies from weeds, you'll find that if you have weeds growing in your field for even a day, you might have a yield loss of 1 to 2 bushels in corn. Okay, so if it starts raining and all of a sudden you don't get out there for 5 days, you could lose 5 to 10 bushels. Well, that way more than pays for that pre-emerge herbicide.
The other thing that you have to look at when you're considering using a pre is what post program am I going to follow up with, and are there some package deals where I can get some better coverage in case I have some issues, or like a respray issue or a replant issue, or are there programs that will save me some more money with rebate dollars and those kind of things. Now, there are quite a few programs that you can do and lots of choices that you have. The standard ones that we're using is a pre-product down for grass. Now, if you're in the Roundup Rewards program using name brand Roundup and Roundup Ready corn, the Harness or Harness Extra program down is a good way to start because they've got some added benefits for you later on when you're respraying, or even in your soybeans they'll give you a little extra money. But if you're not in that Roundup program, or you don't really care what the program is, you just want the best weed control, what I would consider for corn programs is doing something down that's going to do a great job on grass, as Brian mentioned, early in the season. That really robs your yield.
But I guess Darren and I as brothers have to disagree again. Darren just mentioned Harness, which is fine, but then he said Harness Extra, and that's where I've got a problem, Darren. I just can't see putting atrazine down pre-emerge, and I'll tell you why. Because atrazine, even though it's just as safe to humans as table salt, atrazine, if it's found in the groundwater, it's a major issue environmentally. So if, for example, your local paper tomorrow has this study that comes out, and they say they're finding atrazine in the groundwater, that's a big issue. So I absolutely do not recommend using any atrazine pre-emerge in corn. You'll have much better luck environmentally if you can avoid it. Use the atrazine post-emerge, that's fine. I just don't like to see it pre because it can leach so easily, and early in the season what we find is we have bigger rains, we have not a lot of sunlight, we have cooler temperatures. It's very easy for that atrazine to move down before it gets used up or decomposed.
I'm no fan of atrazine pre either.
I know, I just like to give you a hard time though.
Well, it's just you have to talk about it because a lot of companies are trying to convince farmers, hey, you need to put a little atrazine out with your pre because you need some residual out there. Well, I'm fine with the idea that you need some residual, but atrazine's not the way to go, especially in a Roundup Ready program.
Right.
What I would suggest is switching to either using something like Harness down for grass, then coming back just with straight Roundup will do a good enough job on weeds, or you could tank mix one of the products like Callisto or Steadfast or Lotus in there. But what I like even better to get even more residual is go with a full rate of Lotus or Callisto or Status, something like that, and maybe cut the Roundup rate back instead.
Right, exactly, and that's kind of what I was getting at here. I wouldn't do the atrazine thing down. I am not a believer in that. I think environmentally you need to skip that. We've got to be careful what we do environmentally as farmers, just so we don't get over-regulated in the future. But now that Roundup is struggling with these broadleaf weeds, and we've got good products like Callisto and Lotus and Status, you can go a full rate or just an increased rate of those, cut your Roundup rate in half, you're about the same money, and you will absolutely have better control of broadleaves.
Well, all of those choices are great, but they aren't going to do anything for our Weed of the Week. Do you know how to get rid of this weed? We'll show you coming up next.